Most people accumulate debt over their lifetime. And I often see, for example, someone like medical professionals who can accumulate a lot of debt when they're going through school. And it's good debt to accumulate because it's going to provide them with an enormous amount of income in their future. But it's very common for this debt to accumulate and then for life to happen and expenses and lifestyle to still occur, that it can sometimes feel impossible to pay this debt off. And a lot of this debt is outside of, true student loan debt, and it can accumulate to a high amount of interest. And it's unique and it's ironic that it can fall a lot with medical professionals and people that put themselves through school. It might even just be from a business that failed, that you've got this debt and you just can't pay it off. It might be from a rental property that you had to walk away from and you ended up with debt in the end. And so it can happen to anybody. But I wanted to go through a case scenario of how this specific person had $100,000 of debt and they just found it completely impossible to pay off. They had life going and they could not allocate any money to pay down the principal of the debt. They were paying $1,950 in interest-only payments. That meant they were never going to pay this debt off. It was impossible. And as life goes on and with kids and everything, it was overwhelming to them to the point where they felt that it wasn't even worth trying to pay it down because they were never going to be able to do it. So we sat down and we looked at their overall situation. And it sometimes takes someone else to look at everything to get you out of that frozen feeling of just not being able to get, the debt paid down. So here's the scenario. So this person had, if you look at the chart here, $100,000 of debt, and they were paying $1,950 a month in interest-only payments. So you'll see on the chart, it could have gone on forever, that this debt's never paid off because it's interest-only. So pretty simple, makes sense. When we looked at their entire situation, we found that they are receiving about $5,000 in tax refunds per year. And this was just being spent within their cash flow and not really allocated with a specific purpose. So they committed to at least being able to put the $5,000 towards the debt. And they never really decided to do this before, because if you add it up and you allocate the $5,000 and you spend some of the debt again, they just weren't getting anywhere with just allocating the $5,000 anyways. So what we did is we restructured their mortgage, and the mortgage often becomes the one area where people run to get extra equity to pay off debt that they can't pay down. And I first of all said to these people is that we are not going to restructure the mortgage if you're just going to rack up the debt. I would rather you stay where you are. You're in a better financial situation not paying off this $100,000 line of credit than you are restructuring your mortgage, paying off the line of credit, and then racking up the line of credit again. You're better off just not doing anything because you're in a way worse position. Before doing that, I always talk to people about committing to themselves that they're not going to accumulate the debt again, that they need to get to the point where they're just so fed up and they're done and they need to see this thing gone, that they're going to commit and not going to rack up the debt again, and they're just going to change their lifestyle and really commit to paying this down. And so what you'll see on the chart is we've gone from never paying the debt off to paying the debt off in less than 6 years, and not costing this client anything outside of their cash flow except for that RRSP refund that we are going to utilize. So in the chart here, how we have debt and payments restructured, you will see in year one that the debt is $50,000. Now, what I'm only focusing on in year one is the $50,000 consumer debt that's at the very high interest rate. The other $50,000 right now is embedded in the mortgage. We will deal with that in a couple years. So we're just first going to focus on the first $50,000. The minimum payment you'll see is $11,700. This is the amount that they're still allocating towards just interest only. So the interest only pays down that debt. We take the $5,000 and use the tax refund and pay down the debt by $5,000 in the first year. You'll see the column here, apply additional payment. So $8,861 is the amount of cash flow that we freed up by restructuring the debt. So because we took $50,000 and allocated it towards essentially a 3% interest on the mortgage, $8,800 is freed up from interest-only payments that they were paying before. This is now going directly down on principal payment. So Just to reinforce line one, we started with 50. We paid our minimum payment, which we were always paying. We have to pay interest, so then that just accumulates. So we haven't paid anything down with that 11,700. You're back in the same situation. It's the 5,000 that pays it down, and then the 8861 is the additional payment. That is actually paying down that principal debt. At the end of the year, you'll see we have 36,139. So at the beginning of the next year, we have the same amount of debt. Again, we're going to repeat this for 2 years. So all we're essentially doing is paying down the minimum payment that we freed up from the interest payments plus the 5,000 tax refund. You'll see after year 3, this 50,000 that we had that we felt like we were never ever going to get anywhere with is now 8,417. So in year 4, we make just a few more payments, we don't have to make the full payment, and we get that 50,000 to zero. We now have to work on that second 50,000 that's embedded in the mortgage. And we don't want to just leave that alone and say, I'll get to it over the next 25 years. That is part of your, I would call, consumer debt that we need to pay off as soon as we can. So what most people would do is they would just leave that 50 in there and forget about it. But we need to pay that off too. It's important. It's part of the old debt that we need to get rid of. So you'll see in year 5, this is the 50,000 that's part of the mortgage. So at the beginning of the year, we've got 50. We're only now paying down the 5,000, and we're allocating 23,400 to paying that down. And where I got that number is that's the original monthly interest payment that they were paying prior with their other debt. So now, as long as you have enough prepayment availability, which you should, you can pay down 23,400 in year 5, getting this debt down to 21,600. So in year 6, we don't even have to make the full payment again, and we are down to zero. So you can see by simply just restructuring the debt, that interest kills people. When you're paying interest only, you're never going to get anywhere. So by restructuring the debt, and we weren't able to restructure the whole 100,000 into the mortgage just because of what the market value of the house was and the available debt that they had. So we did what we could, but we still made pretty good by paying off the 100,000 because of the debt restructuring in less than 6 years. So when feeling lost and frozen and feeling like debt is impossible, sit down and look at all the ways you can restructure. Make a commitment to yourself that you're going to pay this debt down and you're not going to, reuse it again and rack it back up. And you will be able to pay something off that felt impossible in a very short period of time.